Good morning, everyone. Let me start by welcoming you all to the 17th India Digital Summit brought to you by IAMAI. This is our flagship conference, and we are celebrating the 17th celebration. This time, we are focusing on the central theme, Amritkal Digital India at 100. There are 9 focus tracks specially curated to share the actionable insights for our Honorable Prime Minister's vision. We are bringing together 15+ industry pioneers who will be sharing their power-packed experience and knowledge on digital transformation. This summit is incomplete if I don't mention the partners and associates with us. Our associate partners are Google and MessageBird, growth partner Paytm Ads, lanyard partner Kalra, conversation media partner Bobble AI, agenda partner Disney Star, track partner TCI, digital transformation partner Accenture India, digital media partner Jagran New India. Silver partners are CleverTap and AWS. Our bronze partners are Hexa Webini, Mool One, Exotel, Notify Visitors, PacePrint, and True Balance. Our conversation partner is Value First. I would like to welcome Dr. Amitayu Sengupta, the Associate Vice President of IAMAI, to take it ahead.
Thank you, Indulekha. On behalf of IAMAI, once again, extend a warm welcome to all of you attending the 17th edition of the IDS. We are gathered here on the track of digital transformation. Now, as you know, IAMAI as an industry association, which represents all the digital service providers, has had a very interesting journey since 2004. In the sense, we have grown and evolved at the sector itself, at the service sector itself has evolved. So every year, you will find IAMAI taking a new kind of courses or new committees as new business centers evolve. So for instance, we had the e-commerce, which now has bifurcated into D2C, health tech, edutech, and different sectors as the sector itself has been evolving. And that has been the kind of an engagement with the digital transformation sector itself as well. We have worked in the past on IoT, we have worked on automation, we had separate committees on that. We had a working committee on voice tech when those sectors were evolving. One of the good things about IAMAI is the fluidity that we have in our organizational structures, because our committees are driven by our members themselves. So it's really our members who get together and they give the contour on how the next course of the committee or the action points would be. And this is the context in which we have gathered today, because IAMAI, the Digital Transformation Committee of IAMAI, is going to take a new shape, a new contour under the leadership of Virginia Sharma of Google, who has a great vision to share with us. So we really look forward to working under Virginia's leadership and our membership on how we course the next structure. So with that, I would invite Virginia on stage to share her vision with us.
Thank you. All right, good morning. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for that introduction from the IAMAI team. You know, when the team asked me a couple of months ago, about joining the IAMAI Digital Transformation Council or starting it, my first question was, I can't believe you don't already have one. It just feels like it's 2023. Digital transformation has been in and around us for a while. Like, why now? Why here? And also, what would this council contribute at this stage of our journey versus every other? I mean, there's so many conferences, so many papers, there's so much knowledge around digital transformation. Now, as we did some soul searching to say what value would the council have, we actually realized that, and I'm sorry, I'm using an American university reference, you will have the 101, and you will have the 201, and you'll have the 301. We've actually done the 101, 201, and 301s completely. But there used to be these, a term called graduate seminars. Do they have an equivalent of graduate seminars? So these are when a bunch of people that are more master students get together, literally a much smaller group of people, and they're really not building on the theory that's already there, but they're really in a more of a discussion and a brainstorm about what's next around very niche topics. And part of my bias as a researcher, which is something I do in my private time, is I really see this opportunity for us to develop new thinking, innovative thinking, some breakthrough thinking, for us to really take on some new questions around digital transformation versus regurgitating the same stuff that we read on the internet. There's nothing really special anymore if you can find it on the internet, right? So you really have to create new thinking. And that new thinking is going to come from maybe a group of us synthesizing our different experiences and coming together. So this will not be the mission to actually cut, paste, or regurgitate or paraphrase what we already know, but to actually create new lines of thinking around a few themes that, quite frankly, deserve a little more attention, and we'll have some panels on that. These themes are areas like sustainability, lots of hype around it, but actually none of us in business really know what to do with it, right? AIML, which is the flavor of the season, but funnily, many of us have been in and around analytics and predictive decision-making for many years. So, what's the real kind of business value of AI or applied AI? And then security and privacy, there's a lot of different ways one can think about security, privacy as latching it on at the very end. But with digital transformation, you can't just add it on in the end. So I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go. And I will really rely on you all to help us on the council, which is an infant, a newborn within IAMAI, to actually define whether what we think we could do would be of value to members or not. And I think that can be an open discussion as well. So just to kick off, can you help me move this slide? Okay, great. So on the first point about digital transformation being repackaging, I actually think the word digital and the word transformation separately is also overused. So put them together and it's about as overused as a Punjabi household serving, dal makhni for a party, right? Like everybody has it, like there's no novelty around it. And the answer really is, it is a little bit of repackaging, right? And a lot of it also has to do with the fact that for the last 10 years, we've been looking at it and people have been claiming that they're doing digital transformation. And it's emerged as an agenda from technology vendors, as well as from technology stakeholders in organizations. So it is a little bit of a repackaging. In all honesty, too many people spend too much time defining digital transformation. I actually think it's not important what the definition is. I mean, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But the point is to recognize that does it fundamentally change the way the business delivers value, right? So I used this quote from someone, I don't know if any of you have heard of them. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I think I find that some of the more interesting thinking happens with podcasts. If you have a chance, type in digital transformation, start listening to podcasts. I think you'll find that you'll get a very different sense of knowledge. This was one of the podcasts I heard, and a wonderful quote, I thought, that really captures where I think we're going with this, which is in today's TikTok world where consumers have many choices and limited attention span, which is what's changed in the last 10 years, right? The consumerization of IT. Business leaders are looking for ways to leverage technology as a key enabler of intelligent decision-making. That is pretty constant. I think that there's always been a desire to actually help make better decisions that give them insights, recommendations, and predictions at scale, right, about that changing consumer that changes its mind on what it wants to consume and where it wants to buy from, instead of relying on tribal knowledge and spreadsheets that don't cut it. Now, this is sort of the dark underbelly of the C-suite and boards, not very technologically advanced. There's a lot of heuristics and mental models that drive decision-making on boards about what feels like a good decision. I think that many of us can have a debate of whether 30 years of business experience is as valuable as data. It's probably the combination. But this idea of replacing tribal knowledge of decision makers, and there used to be the argument that it can't really be tribal knowledge that drives it because, so much has changed. But then a lot of senior leaders would say, I've been around a long time. I've seen this pattern many cycles. Let's go with that. And then you have the techies and the data scientists saying, but the data says that customers are going to do this. Never the two generations shall meet. I think for us, as we take on digital transformation, we're trying to actually find this intersection where we can actually not be one or the other, but a mix of both. So I thought this quote really captured the essence of what we can actually support as the council. And this is what I was talking about in a little more detail. If you look at the right side, which is the yang, right? So far, and please correct me if I'm off, a lot of our digital transformation projects Actually, can I ask, how many of you all have been a part of or have observed or been the beneficiary or, you know, the victim of a digital transformation project in your organization? Okay, so they changed some process, they changed some system, and you were on the receiving end, good or bad. And if you look at it, many of them are declared as successes based on IT metrics. We've reduced the cost of this, we've been able to improve the turnaround time of this. But if you ask an average stakeholder in the organization, did it really change the way you do your work? Does it really change the way, does it make you more successful? Has it changed your relationship with customers? Most people will say, no, you know, I saved some time, we saved some money, it was cheaper, we have less people. And so ROI here is really measured very differently when it's on the Yang side. Talent is very much about different vendors coming in, pitching RFPs, this project, that project. I've been in tech for about 24 years at IBM and Microsoft and now Google. You know, I have stock in all of them, I want all of them to do well, but the reality is the tech vendors do set the agenda for a lot of this type of transformation. Right? The use cases are very defined. It tends to be very risk averse, which is what have you done in banking? Who else has done it? Can I call somebody to see if they've actually done it? And if they've done it and you've seen success, I want to replicate that. Let's face it, all of us are more comfortable with that side. And the tech tends to be packaged software. The minute you get into customization, then you're worried you can't hire the people. If I move on to my next job, who's going to run it? So on and so forth. So you may recognize digital transformation from the right side of the screen. What the council wants to take on is the left side of the screen, right? Let's talk about business benefits, but not just P&L and balance sheets. Let's talk about net zero, right? Let's talk about that as one of the outcomes of digital transformation is achieving the company's sustainability things. Nobody does that, right? But it is actually something boards are actually looking at as formal metrics for success, right? ROI is not years. It's not for the annual board meeting. It's actually in weeks or months. And it's not just about pilots, by the way. It's pilots that scale. So you do it quick, you fail fast, and then you scale it out. Talent is about building that in-house, differentiated talent organization. Do you have AI skills in-house? Do you have security skills in-house that are not just, you know, essentially running packaged software, but really thinking about your security strategy? Are you thinking about people who actually own your data models and train your data models in-house, right? Use cases, right? These are both defined, but also experimentative, right? Scary stuff for, especially if you work in an Indian organization, to say, hey, we're not going to do something that we're going to do something that no one else has done, right? It's not a comfortable space. Otherwise, you'll have a bunch of people that have already done it on the stage. What you'll find today is that we have a mix of people that have done some things, but nobody's done everything. And the tech is sort of emerging tech that's figuring out its roots. So it's allowed to actually evolve based on how we influence it. In fact, the council should influence the agenda of vendors on what they should be building and building to India. So let me give you a few examples, both from abroad and from here, on where I see this working in yin and yang. The first one is Ford, and I don't want to get into the details. It's something that we can talk about in subsequent conversations. Ford has done a pretty phenomenal job of going beyond being, you know, an automobile company to really being a mobility service provider, right? A mobility provider. And what they've done is they've actually created an ecosystem using digital experiences to really think about Ford not as a vehicle, but as an experience, right? And that ecosystem actually is what now enables connected vehicles and a bunch of other features that otherwise, if they had thought of themselves as in the business of making cars, they wouldn't have been able to do that. But closer to home, we're really impressed, the council's really impressed with what Mahindra is doing locally. See, Mahindra initially really thought of digital transformation, like many of us, as modernizing SAP. Many of us start there, right? Let's modernize our apps, let's modernize our ERP, let's bring down the amount of time it takes for us to measure inventory, et cetera. But they very quickly realized that if you just do Yang, you just do SAP modernization, and you don't start thinking about new experimental use cases, you're not going to go very far. So they took on omni-channel experiences as it relates to car launches. right? So the Scorpio is an iconic launch. In the marketing circles, it is infamous that their launches are so successful, their website has crashed every year, right? And in fact, they use that in the awards things. Our launch was so successful, the website crashed. They took it upon themselves to say, how about we have such a successful launch and the website doesn't crash? Like maybe that would be worth what ends up being $2.8 billion of bookings. If you choose not to take the vanity metric of website crashing, that's real money. So they undertook a digital transformation on how they launched the car so that they were able to take 150,000 bookings in the first 30 minutes and the website didn't crash. Imagine all those people that wouldn't have come back if the website had crashed. That's worth something. That's a board conversation, right? Does anybody recognize this shoe? Does anybody have this shoe? Okay, I hope you don't, because this shoe only resides in the metaverse. This is a shoe that actually Nike created for the metaverse. You can buy it in the metaverse. You can't buy it anywhere else. And it was $150,000, give or take, of sales of this shoe that doesn't exist in real life, that you can actually buy to dress your avatar. Pretty cool, right? So it's a different way to think about shoe experiences and to create exclusivity. You know, there's something really magical, and I have to always give this Apple example. You know, when you buy an Apple product, you don't just buy a product. You join a club. And it's from that moment of you actually buying the product to them actually taking you to the Genius counter and unboxing it and turning it on together and logging in. The Get Started button is the beginning of your digital journey with Apple, right? So there's the hardware, but actually your relationship with Apple is on that Get Started button because now you're in the Apple ecosystem, right? So this idea that you can actually be a hardware provider, a shoe manufacturer, a car vendor, but your relationship goes beyond the product you're selling to the experience that you create that really creates that moat around your customer is what will drive retention. And what is customer retention? A great board metric, right? And of course, you know, I think in the main tent we talked about the India tech stack. I mean, this is sort of our prize jewel. This is sort of this is ours to lose, as they say, right? We talked about UPI and payments in the main tent. Do you all have visitors that come from overseas nowadays that are shocked when we pay digitally? I don't know whether I find that condescending or whether I find that as a compliment, but they're like, oh, so you guys don't use cash and you can do all that? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. And so it's a little bit ours to lose, but it's also ours to actually take into multiple use cases, right? So whether it be taking this into climate tech or health tech, we have to take it further than just payments. And that's, by the way, there's a payments council of the IAMAI, but there's also now this council. So the job of this council is to advance the use cases beyond that. And we actually have a panel discussion and someone from the payments industry who will also talk a little bit about that. So great. These are the kinds of things that are happening in our own world. So what's next? So this is the classic boring consulting chart, right? Somebody gets paid a lot of money for the triangles and the thing, and mine doesn't move. But someone very smart has put this together. The council will not speak this language. The council will take this and speak in the form of actual this language. Sorry, did you want to take a picture of the previous one? You're very happy to. Somebody paid a lot of money. Can you just, sorry, go back into the... I saw somebody taking a picture of the chart that this one. Can you just go into the, should I go into the screenshot? Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, go ahead. Well, look, there's some value to consulting charts for any of you guys that are consultants. So let me take a minute since you guys like the chart, looks like, which is, it is true, and you'll hear a lot of podcasts that talk about this, that digital transformation is not a technology thing, it's a change management, it's a culture thing. It starts with your talent and it starts with your culture and whether your organization is ready for it. No doubt that this is the foundations. So we actually do use this at my company. This is a chart that is used at Google often, which is about attracting, nurturing, and encouraging talent. And, you know, there's a whole side around being data-driven and innovative, providing empowerment, but also providing the strategy and structure you need. No doubt this is true. The problem is a lot of people don't understand how to bring this into their organizations. It's really complicated unless you actually have a like a long-term consulting engagement with a change management office that helps you go through this. And then by then people lose interest and, things happen and you move on. So we actually like this version of the conversation, which is looking at what is not digital transformation, right? So the first signal that you think you're doing digital transformation, but you're really not, is whether you're seeing things in terms of IT cost reduction, business cost avoidance. That's not digital transformation. So if the previous chart was what is digital transformation, this is not digital transformation. So if you're not able to articulate your digital transformation at a business benefit, you're not doing it. The second one is if you actually are doing incrementality. We saw 5% improvement or 10% improvement, or we did it at a department level and now we're going to scale. It's not really digital transformation, right? You need an innovation team. You need a milestone-based budget, so you release more budget, not based on a final outcome, but on milestones that are agreed. It's agile, it can fail, you pivot. If the ROI is taking months or years, both in terms of getting the ROI and measuring ROI, a lot of people do a project for 6 weeks, but it takes 3 months to find an outcome. That's not digital transformation. You need to actually look at it in terms of a minimal viable product. If there's no digital skills development happening as you're doing it, and you've got a specialist team that's come in, and you've had to hire a bunch of people from outside to do this, and no one inside knows, and you're running digital in pockets, and every team has one digital person, and nobody else knows what that person does, and we hope that they do a good job. Wow, this is getting increasingly nightclub-oriented. Okay, and the final one is, if you're working with an IT vendor, but you're not actually working with an ecosystem of domain experts, ecosystem of actually freelancers, pulling in the best skills out there, startups. If you don't actually have an ecosystem where you're building in, so if you're in healthcare and you're not working with health tech startups, right? If you're in e-commerce and you're not working with new startups in your space around customer experience, are you really doing digital transformation? All your ideas cannot reside within your boundary wall, right? So we're taking the approach to talk about when you're not doing digital transformation is the baseline. And so what we're going to do, and this is my final point, which is around the things in yellow, Brian, in blue, net zero, AIML, and security, are the 3 topics we're going to start the council with on the left side. We're not going to tackle anything on the right side. So when people say, Virginia, what about 5G or automation? My assumption is you know enough about 5G, automation, data analytics, data lakes. You should have your data. We're not going to use the term, I'm saying it now, but we're not going to use it again. The quality of your data needs to be good. Assume that it does. You need to have some partners in place to help you implement. Yes, assume that you do. So this is really the master class in digital transformation, not the 101, 201, or 301 of digital transformation. So as we started, we're going to launch this first with sustainability, and I'm going to be inviting up my panelists on this. And then, we're going to be, after that, talking about AIML, and specifically really focus on applied, you can't see it there, but there's 3 themes. The first one is sustainability, and the next one is AIML, and the third one will be on security and privacy. This quarter, we're going to launch sustainability. I would invite you, if you're interested in contributing to this topic, to express your interest to join the committee. And the other thing I'll say is that you don't have to be an expert in sustainability to join the committee. You just have to know what the right questions are. So the committee's role is to define the question around sustainability, the right question around AIML, and the right question around security. And then it will be the work of us collaborating to find the answers, to launch any kind of research projects, bring in the domain experts and put out a point of view. But just know that this is more related to if you have an area where you understand enough to ask good questions, which is actually oftentimes much harder. So that's my intro talk. With that, can I invite up Raman and Sishir to join me to talk about sustainability? And as they're settling in, can I ask if there are any questions? Or feedback, by the way, please. Thank you. Yes, please. I think so. Is that the best way? Would you suggest It's more for the audience to be able to hear you. So please introduce yourself if you have a moment. Not a long question, though, so that we can actually...
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Great.
Any specific reason you were speaking about in-house talent and its requirement rather than doing it outside? What is the thinking behind this whole thing?
So typically what we found is if you don't build in-house capabilities around your digital transformation pillar, it typically sits as a consultant-led, vendor-led initiative in potentially one part of the organization, but is actually not owned by anybody in the organization. So its success and its failure, right, sits outside. Now, where this becomes a problem is that when you start going through cost pressures and you have to reduce the amount of expenses, let's say you have to take 25% off, costs, the IT team or the business teams, you have to find efficiencies. Typically, you will start with some of these flexible contracts to actually reduce their scope. If there's no one in-house that can pick up, for example, the project office, there's no one that can take over a certain, let's say that you've actually launched an app, right, to actually bring some level of digital experience to some of your stakeholders. And there's no one in-house that owns that app because it was owned by a third party, let's say an agency or a contractor. That dies on the vine because it's an orphaned project. So the idea is that as you're bringing in an external vendor, invest in the skilling up of your team real time versus waiting until that project is successful and over and then deciding who's the team that's going to own it. Make investment in the skills of the team real time versus making it during the change management time. Right?
Is this something you have seen abroad as well? Because in India, our experience has been that things primarily get done in-house, and then first it is under the head of CTO, then a CDS comes in, and then some other CXO comes in. It keeps rotating, and then this person was not right, another person comes in.
Correct.
Nothing gets done.
Yeah, I think it's global that there tends to be sponsors of projects, and when the sponsor leaves, the project dies. So the skills really have to be at the practitioner level. Yeah. And that's one thing, which is we leave our practitioners to actually come with their own knowledge from their previous organization. If you're a bank, you hire somebody that's actually got skills previously in core banking transformation. We're scared that and this is true of India, we're scared to invest in people's skills because we're scared they're going to get good enough to leave us. So I think the point over here is, do you really want to be in a position that they're not going to, which is the worst of both evils? But thank you for the question. I'm so glad that your first question is about talent, because a digital transformation council, you wouldn't actually think about human beings, you'd always think about something else. But with that, let's start the panel.
Hello.
So, yes, somebody had a question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can I just interrupt?
Yes, of course.
Yes, so just adding to his point and all, I am from Planet Marathi, which is the first Marathi OTT app, okay? And we devised everything in-house, which was like contrary to all the other OTTs wherein they just had a tech stack getting rented from, outsourced from different agencies and all. That is also a practical solution. When it comes to resources, you need to have resources in place, you need to have talents in place. You need to have that roadmap completely done so that whenever there is a failure, there are different things to it. So I think there's a combination of what you spoke and what he spoke.
Yeah, it's a combination. You have to hedge your bets. And a place like India, we have the benefit of actually finding talent externally, but also internally.
Right.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Great. So let's get started. Am I on? Great. Oh. Wonderful. Actually, do you mind if I just stay standing so that I can actually see the crowd? All right, so allow me to introduce this excellent panel, Raman Kalra, who is recently the CDO for Renew Power, I think a crown jewel of our country's sort of sustainability or green energy portfolio. And Sishir Garemella, who actually has been in and around the climate finance space and is a key influencer in this space. You should follow him on LinkedIn. He has a lot of thought leadership in this space. And the way we're going to have this conversation is really bring it from what's happening at policy what's happening at the board level, and what's now happening and what needs to be something that we do at our level as well. And then we'll have a few questions as well. So let me get started. If you could both just share a little bit about your journey and background with sustainability and what kind of brought you to this point, that would be really great.
All right, thank you, IAMAI and Virginia, for having me here. Little philosophical start, but I've always been fascinated by the sun. You know, solar energy to me stands for freedom, independence. You know, always played sport as a childhood. So I think my entry into sustainability largely comes from my interest in solar, and I've been in the space for about last 12 years. And you know, if you really look at major development goals for any economy, agri, healthcare, power, education, these are the metrics. So it just happened to be that you know, my educational background and work experience all sort of aligned. So quick 1 minute on my background. I've born bred in India, but lived for 10 years abroad, Canada and the UK. Studied, worked in automobile industry and then financial services. I came to India 12 years ago to start a solar company, and I'm pivoted and still figuring out myself as an entrepreneur, but I've been in this space and pretty much seen it all now with clean energy. So if you see my sustainability conversation steer away towards clean energy, please pull me back, because that's really what's close to my heart. And you know, just a final point is that I draw a lot of my inspiration in personal and professional life through long distance running. So a lot of sustainability in one word really for me means good health. And if you can keep your health good, everything else adds up, you know. So I'll stop here. Raman, to you now.
Okay, thanks. No?
Here you go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Thanks Virginia for having us here, and thanks Sishir for setting the tone. Quick introduction about me. First of all, a quick correction to the chart that you see. I'm ex-Renew Power, which now is Renew. So they did a rebranding, you know, last week as Renew. And talking about myself a little bit, been pretty much a lifer consultant. Have led and consulted in industries across utilities way back when we thought India will transform in mid-2000s and late 2000s. But it didn't happen, unfortunately, at that time. Not much action happened on the ground. And then subsequent to that, I did about 10, 12 years of consulting, predominantly focused on consumer, media, tech, on that side of industry, deep into media. And it so happened about 2 years back when, call it as a midlife crisis or whatever, when I started thinking about doing more gratifying work in life. And I was debating between, to your point also, Sishir, I was debating between agriculture, healthcare, education, these three, and of course tech part of it. So agri-tech, ed-tech, and health tech. And being a digital strategist and digital professional for most part of my life. So that is the time when I happened to meet Suman from Renew, and that was also the time when news media had started talking about climate change 2 years back. 2 years back was the awakening for most of us when the reports were published and people started reading a lot about that 1.5 degree impact. So I think I realized that what could be more meaningful than climate tech and climate. And then I thought about it, linking it with the digital theme that we have. That industry works, it's a no-brainer that the energy transition need to happen to green energy. But then that energy can be generated only when the sun shines or when the wind blows. Now, your grid can't have that kind of uncertainties, right? Grid needs a lot of stability. So there is a significant role that digital play. Of course, we'll talk about it in the subsequent discussion. And I thought that, from energy perspective, digital is going to be at the core heart of the new grid of the future. And it is the need of the planet so much going forward. At the same time, there is a lot of work that is happening in the ecosystem. So that was a driving force in my mind to move to sustainability as a theme. And last 2 years, did deep dive into sustainability from a utility company point of view, from a B2B, C&I, businesses, hard-to-abate sector point of view, why, what, how, what are the limitations, so on and so forth. And today I can say that it's a topic very, very close to heart, having worked on it for the last 2 years. Yeah.
That's great. So this is also an indication. Sometimes I find, as an outsider from the digital world, that the whole sustainability conversation resides with people like Shishir who've been doing it from the beginning? And is it accessible to us digital professionals? Do we actually have a role to play? Do you have to have a certain level of background? And what's really inspiring for me about Raman's career is this ability to be in digital, being a digital consultant. He and I worked together about a decade ago at IBM where we worked on some media pitches, and to make that pivot and say, hey, you know what, let me actually contribute not just as a personal kind of commitment, but you can actually make a career out of actually investing in your passion. So let me start off with the theme of the conference, which is Amritkal, right? The next 25 years. Is the conversation about sustainability relevant in the context of the next 25 years of India, or is it still largely something that is a Western conversation? So Shishir, can I ask you to start with that?
Thanks. I think, well, I'd say quite the opposite. I mean, look at how India has evolved over the last many hundreds of years. Look at our grandmothers and how they were doing sustainability at home and circular economy. We never wasted a lot of things. So sustainability is very close to the heart of India. Unfortunately, this has become another thing that we have exported and now we are being sold to us repackaged. But more seriously, even if you look at Mahatma Gandhi's Gram Swaraj and village level work, you know, so India's always stood for being close to nature and being sustainable. So this is not at all a Western concept, but in the more contemporary conversation about climate being a foreign policy issue and carbon offsets and climate finance, India is very much, from a policy point of view and from a country point of view, very much aligned with the global goals of reduction. But yes, definitely not a Western concept, something that we have always owned and adapted to.
Okay, great. Raman, anything to add? Anything?
Yeah, I think I'll just add one point to it. See, as a nation, as a world, and as a planet Earth, we already know that we are struggling with this whole 1.5 degree, you know, by impact. You know, now people are talking about 2 degree. Now, bulk of it, most of it, has been an output of the advancements and the development that happened in the Western world. You know, those economies, those worlds, those nations grew. The industrialization over there has already happened. We as a nation are we are embarking that journey. For us, next 10 years, next 20 years is going to be a deep investment in infrastructure, deep investment and growth in manufacturing sector. So as a growing economy, one option could have been that, you know, you guys have spoiled, you know, the whole thing. It doesn't mean that I don't grow now. India has to grow. So it is so much of an India topic, not just a Western topic, because as a nation, we have a dual responsibility, we have a dual challenge. We have to grow at 7+%, you know, of economic growth. At the same time, we have to make sure that our growth doesn't really add to the pressures on climate change. So I think it is by choice or by commitment or by, you know, multiple means, it is very much a relevant Indian topic in today's world, very, very relevant.
So this dual challenge of growth and achieving our targets, Shishir, a question for you. Do you think that we are set up as industry? Are we enabled and are we in the right place in terms of policy and financing? Is this an environment that we can actually drive this dual objective, or is there still work to be done there?
So there are 2 layers to this question. One is policy, I'll take that first, and then finance, right? Any form of intervention within sustainability, be it renewable power, be it electric mobility, be it plastics, be it ethanol, biofuels, all of this is driven by policy leadership. And to that extent, I'm very happy to say that you know, the current government and India's stance is very clear. We're a top 5 country globally for wind and solar. We are, I don't know if you're following the latest news, but we have a plastic ban, which is still in the works, you know, but Chandigarh announced a very interesting EV policy, which has now created some ripple effects. We are far ahead of our ethanol policy deployment. So policy-wise, it is very much a priority. And I think the government is taking a very serious leadership in that. From a finance point of view, look, this whole transition, energy transition, decarbonization, whatever word you want to use, would take billions of dollars worth of capital. And as a growing country, we have other priorities. So some amount of this money will come from outside. We have some of the biggest, on the equity side, some of the biggest pension funds, some of the biggest infrastructure asset management companies that have invested in Renew as well, you know. So they are there. On the debt side, the Indian banking system and NBFC system can take so much, but eventually we have to, you know, raise green bonds and things like that. On that front, I think the only call that the financiers are asking for is policy stability. Because to put money, you know, 15-year money, Canadian pension fund takes a call on India and then suddenly the rules change. That is not good look for anybody. So I think number one is policy stability. And the other point that I'd like to raise on the finance side is that India is very much integrated to the world outside now through just, I mean, apart from India and China, there are no two large countries with that much demand, right? So how do you make it more friendly? So I'll just leave you with one example. I don't know if you've heard of Gift City in Gandhinagar. There is a city that's coming up. It'll have a green exchange. Now that green exchange, you can raise your money in dollars sitting in Gandhinagar. It's like a little SEZ. So these are interventions that the government is thinking to make India more friendly to the capital outside and vice versa. So very much aligned on policy and finance. But like everything else, you know, these things take time and they need to be ironed out. And another point I'd like to make is anything that is central government driven or less number of stakeholders driven typically is executed better. But electricity as a concept or a few other concepts like transport have both a center and a state view on it. And that's where India's true democratic republic comes to light, and that's where we see things that are not in sync sometimes. But those are our internal problems to iron out.
And you know, there's the benefit of actually having the system that we have versus, for example, what China has, which is a lot more centralized and efficient, but there's other issues with that.
Correct.
So Raman, going deeper on the private sector, right, you've advised many of these companies, you know, around the largest companies in the space. You know, do you think that digital transformation, so marrying your two experiences, not from a Renew point of view, but let's take automotive, for example. Do you think there's a role that digital transformation could have in helping these companies get closer to net zero?
So when I was with Renew, you know, which is just about 2 weeks back, till about 2 weeks back, you know, we worked on a strategy on that should we be just a green energy provider to the B2B, the C&I, the enterprises, the industries, or should we be a strategic decarbonization partner? So we worked with a lot of ecosystem players, you know, including, you know, the global tech companies and other partners, that how do we really help digitally leverage the whole net zero transformation journey of B2B. Now take an example, you know, some of the hard to abate sectors like cement or textile or chemicals. Now, some of the cost, you know, besides the raw material cost that goes into it in terms of fuel, now that's of course is a very different solution, how and when they move from, let's say the gray fuel to a more greener fuel, whether it is green hydrogen or something else. But other than that, there are significant costs that comes in terms of power that they consume. Now, energy consumption is not just about replacing, you know, you buying energy which is a coal-powered fired plant, or vis-a-vis replacing it with a green energy by setting up your own solar or wind, or buying solar or wind from, let's say, companies like Renew or you know, other green energy companies. Now, that is not just the solution. That the solution lies in understanding your consumption patterns better, having a lot of data science behind that what are my consumption behavior, what is my demand pattern, can I recycle my manufacturing to align more closely with my demand patterns, how does that align with the power supply and demand equation in the market, how do I make what is the efficiency of my various equipments in the manufacturing plant and the offices, are these best in class, what are the data points where, and there's a lot of sensors and AI/ML data that builds on top of it. So the whole energy efficiency, which is that digital can play a significant role in understanding better and reducing your consumption. Now that reduction in consumption is a straight value in the sense that much of capital doesn't need to go in setting up a new power plant. So, you know, so from a larger point of view. So digital will play a significant role in understanding the consumption better, building up more efficient solutions behind that, and then of course also leveraging to procure power in a much better fashion, in a much organized and a efficient manner. So that is just one example. Now, there are numerous such examples which come into play for the hard-to-abate sectors, for the whether it is automobiles or the other segments, that how do we really leverage digital technologies to make our operations so much more efficient that we cut it down. Now, from a scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 perspective, there are a lot of guidelines, there are a lot of regulations that have come into existence now. Scope 1, scope 2 becomes, a mandatory reporting for a lot of enterprises, depending on, where do we really stand in terms of turnover in the segment. And scope 3, while it is not mandatory, but a lot of companies who are doing that, they stand to gain significant advantage in terms of capital availability to them. So from a boardroom perspective, it is a very pertinent discussion today that can I go and stand beyond what the regulatory requirements expect from me and invest in more intelligent digital solutions to understand my scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions and start reporting on that voluntarily? Can I start doing carbon accounting internally? So a lot of these things need significant digital penetration. Now, from a digital, if I assume that in this room we have a lot of digital practitioners, you got to really start thinking beyond the standard digital solutions which comes into consumer experience, which comes into ERPs, which comes into manufacturing, solutions, so on and so forth, and start thinking about what are the digital solutions into play for sustainability. What are the digital solutions which are at play? What can be done to build smarter, data-driven, intelligent solutions for understanding, measuring, understanding, and reducing my emissions? So I think, from a long story short, Virginia, to your point, irrespective of what segment we come from, whether it's automobile, textile, cement, aviation, shipping, these are some of the deepest polluters from a carbon perspective. They have to really leverage digital significantly.
So that's a great answer. In fact, there's a couple of things I learned from that. Number one is this idea that you can't get started until you can measure your current usage, right? So this idea, especially when we spoke about the ecosystem play, companies that are developing solutions that can help measure seem to be, have a role to play. The second thing I heard about you is that it's not just about measuring your carbon footprint, which obviously is the core part of it, but also taking the pressure off your cash to be able to deploy to more innovation-driven projects. And I think this is really interesting because I was recently in a board meeting for a company that I support as a board director, and boards typically get a lot of CapEx expense proposals from the business units, right? The CEOs of the different businesses say, we want to put in a plant here, we want to go spend X amount here, and the board has to approve these. But our fundamental questions as board members is, well, why do you need to actually set that up? What is it that you can do with your current capacity that can actually pay for this, right? Instead of actually raising more money by actually issuing more debt or equity. So these are the type of conversations that happen at the board level to say, well, this thing should pay for itself. If you need more power to feed this, how are you going to actually fund that from within the same project of a steel plant or so on and so forth? But the third thing I learned is actually, if you listen to a lot of the industries that actually Raman mentioned, it spans a gamut of industries. A lot of time people think of digital transformation as largely e-commerce or logistics or things that involve that. But a lot of the industries he's talking about are actually our mainstay, whether it be cement, et cetera. So we shouldn't assume that the digital transformation focus can only be around a few industries that are sort of on the cutting edge. Great. So back to you, Shishir. I'm going to ask you all a couple more questions and then open it up. Is really, if you think about organizations, and you mentioned that now that boards have net zero goals, what would you advise organizations in terms of the levers they can use to get started?
Yeah, I think the very first step that any organization or board needs to do is to measure where they stand today. I think that's one of the first things to do. If you want to leave this place with one sustainability jargon, I'd call it MRV. M stands for measurement, R stands for reporting, and V for verification. So once you have measured what's my current status, then the next step would be to decide how much of this can I mitigate myself, and how much of this can I sort of offset through carbon, etc. The stuff that you can mitigate yourself is where you have to look at actionable things to do. And that's where, very interestingly, the gentleman asked a question around talent. Talent comes in a lot with this because not often do you have talent within the company. So you have to get it from outside the company. But once the project is over, it will be passed on. So from a board perspective, there are three things. Number one, first, measure how deep are you in the carbon footprint. The second is put up a plan to get the right kind of people from the outside to be able to deliver on reducing that carbon. And third is to set up a team in-house to be able to take that over, because this is not a business that a consultant will do forever for you, right? This is now there is a BRSR requirement by SEBI, which is a business responsibility and sustainability reporting, which means that you have to do this on a yearly basis, reporting. And you have to prove that, okay, if I say that I have reduced this much carbon, this is the proof that I've actually verified it, right? So from a board perspective, these are three major items: is to measure first. The second is to sort of figure out the next steps of action. And third is to build a team. The other thing that boards really require is how to access finance. Because nobody wants to put their existing balance sheet for these things, right? So it has to make sense, and there is enough climate-friendly capital available globally and within India. So you need to have an interaction with the finance community as well. Chalo, theek hai, we now know what to do, but somebody has to figure out how to get money to do it, right? So these are the 3 or 4 aspects that I think the board should consider.
That's great. So let me take a moment and turn it to the audience. Given some of these practices on measurement and some of the ways to get started, do any of you all have any anecdotes, experiences that you'd like to share with the broader group? Because sometimes when you actually make it seem like this has been done or attempted, it's okay if it didn't work. Would anybody like to share something from within the organization or something that you've personally led or been a part of? Okay, so clearly a good knowledge subject, but hopefully some good takeaways for you all to get started. Also, if you were part of the ecosystem and working on startup technologies, could be good places to start looking at seeding some of these technologies and some of these dashboards into your products as well. So let me turn it, Raman, back to you, which is, we are, the Digital Transformation Council, taking on sustainability as its first topic surprised some people. They were kind of expecting us to start with, like, how do we actually solve for, the new and exciting shiny thing that keeps coming up. From your point of view, why do you think sustainability and digital transformation and the other 2 themes, which is security and AI, why do you think they all sort of belong in the same sandbox, given the fact that you have seen digital transformation projects on your own?
So when I heard, in your keynote, when you're talking about sustainability as the first theme that the council has picked up, I was truly delighted. And I'll tell you why. Because besides the moral, if I use the word obligation or commitment, I think we all have that. But besides that, I think what people don't realize is that the role of digital to achieve sustainability in the new changing world is more than what we could even imagine. Just to give an example, the grid today all of us consume electricity. It's a matter of time. We all will be prosumers. We are all moving towards a prosumer economy where every individual, every household, every company, every building, for example, every car, and a lot of gadgets will consume electricity and also will have the potential of supplying electricity to the grid. Now imagine a world in your mind, if you can create a picture, visualize, let's say the Connaught Place area where we are right now is a bundle of offices and some residentials and some shoppings and all. If all of these have, let's say, things like solar rooftop, if they have options of a lot of EVs parked around, and every EV has the potential of electricity stored in a battery. And there are some small storage installed in various buildings, etc. Then the peak load is something that can get managed by very smart digital solutions and digital interventions within the Connaught Place area. So if you can imagine, if CP is a self-sustainable entity, it doesn't even need power from the grid. Imagine, right? Then multiply that with a few million such pockets. You know, in my hypothetical analysis, I say that maybe a few decades down the line, our dependence on the large grids or the large power plants will significantly go down. You know, so because we will be a whole distributed energy resources management all across the world, and it cannot happen without digital.
Yeah.
You know, so, and then it will also have automatic implications in the sense that, okay, how can AI be leveraged over there responsibly and ethically? What are the security challenges around that? So I think keeping sustainability on the driving seat in the digital council and then integrating it with both AI and security is a very smart thing to do. And I can actually go on and on with multiple examples, but I'll keep quiet right now. And I see, you know, I'm getting very impatient.
I'm very itchy to share something which is not, but please, after you're done. Yeah.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, because I've been looking at these mentors, and I wanted to share with you one quick development which has nothing to do with the energy
Like the
sector.
Mentos?
Yeah, the Mentos.
Okay.
There will be a time very soon that each of these Bisleri bottles and Mentos might have like how you have a health and nutritional number, it might also have a carbon footprint number. Now imagine how much impact that might have. And these startups and these things have already started. We all will have individual carbon footprint metrics. Imagine if those, I don't know, 10 Mentos were to be floating around in Delhi's plastic junkyards. There is an ability to measure, report, and use this data. Today, none of this is measured. This is all plastic. This is plastic as well. So another example, this was more a consumer product kind of a story, which is why I was edgy to interrupt. But also, there's a logistics company that wants to change its pallets to reusable pallets, right? But a pallet, where is it? Is it in Japan? Is it in India? How do you monitor that? A quick barcode scan, which is a digital interface to a sustainable solution. These are concepts that people have already started to talk about, and we haven't even gotten to a point where Cannot Place is its own energy center. Imagine if it does become, and then we have these digital solutions. It is really, the next 25 years are going to be very interesting from a mishmash of these two large buckets of development.
You know, I hear this and I can visualize what these city centers can look like. You know, it's actually almost exciting that things that we can do can actually change the way we experience certain parts of our city that we take for granted a certain way. Like, how many of you have ever looked up and seen the number of electricity, you know, that we don't steal power, but if you go around Old Delhi, the number of people that are actually stealing electricity from left, right, and center, the wires, right? I mean, we now take for granted that that's the way we consume electricity, is to steal it. And on that, I want to share a little bit of an anecdote. We started by talking about Gandhinagar. Yes, but yeah. So right after this, so about 10 years ago, I worked on a CSR project with a group of consultants in what is now Gandhinagar, which is quite a prosperous place. But about 10 years ago, outside Indore, the local housing community that was right next to Gandhinagar put in a complaint to say that, you know, that Gandhinagar is stealing our water. A little bit different. And so we have water shortages, so then we have to go into the bore well, and there's a whole bunch of things in all our rain harvesting and our water harvesting is failing because whatever we have is getting lost to theft in the country, which is where policy and things come together. And so we did a 4-week CSR project. You remember the Corporate Service Corps back at IBM. And we went and met the local people from Gandhinagar, and we said, you know, well, how do we solve this issue? And you have to start paying for water. And they actually said, and this really gets rid of it, there was a lady that was sort of like the champion of Gandhinagar at the time, this nice, robust lady. And she said, we're not going to pay for anything that you can't measure. Because what if my neighbor is using more water than I'm using? So I'll pay. I don't have a problem with paying, but I want to pay fairly. So I don't want to steal water from the community. But if you charge me 1 rupee and you charge the neighbor 1 rupee, because initially we had said everybody pays 1 rupee each and everybody will have water. So we installed water meters and they started being able to measure, and she took the ownership, this idea of somebody asked the question about why in-house talent. She took the ownership of actually using that to kind of do the measurement and collecting the payments to submit it to the society. And what we discovered is that once you start bringing water into a particular community, right, hygiene goes up, kids are bathing, illness goes down, right? Once you bring water into a community, which is outside, You can make cement. When you can make cement, you can put a road into a city, right? And if you can put a road into a city, what happens? Politicians start driving through. And when you start having politicians start driving through before their visit, electricity goes up because you need lights, right? So suddenly this one conversation about water then actually created a whole community, which is now a major vote bank, right? And a major center, but it all started with a conversation. So you can transform community living and make it sustainable cities. In fact, it's listed as one of the growing kind of emerging models because you solve an issue by starting with measuring. So I wanted to share that story because I thought connected the dots beautifully. Yes, you had a question. Let me give you this.
Hi, my name is Ushpinda. Sorry, I came in late. I'm here purely because I have interest in the topic. And I just had a question which probably is out of context, but this came into my mind when Raman was talking about Connaught Place and, electricity and smart meters. A few months ago, and this is a question which I don't know if it's for this audience or not, right? A few months ago, I was watching normal news channel, right? And there were folks, there are corporates who've deployed smart meters, right? In certain parts of the country. And we keep hearing news where villagers going out and vandalizing those smart meters, right? So is there a thought, right? I know this is more of a policy question, but is there a thought of how do you educate and how do you bring the whole ecosystem into and explain it to them the benefits, right? Sorry. I don't know.
That's a great question. No, you can keep, yeah, thank you.
See, there could be, there is no one right answer to it. So my perspective on this is twofold. One, it's a natural process of change, in a different avatar that happens. So people will stop vandalizing it and start adopting it once they understand that what's in it for me. And they will understand and appreciate it more with things becoming reality like, consumer participation. So what happens is that, today, as a citizen collaboration program, there is an opportunity for people, and this could be a reality in a multiple bigger manner going forward, that I give the access of a lot of gadgets I consume or the high power consuming equipment that I have at home to the utility. So you can allow me or disallow me to use my, let's say, washing machine or let's say a dishwasher at any point in time, depending on the peak load and the demand supply at the grid level. By giving you that access, an option, I get a subsidy on my bill, right? I'm just giving one example. So let's say a citizen collaboration program where smart meter plays a significant role and the other technologies which open up, the access and give you the access as a utility provider, people will start seeing the benefits of it. Now, like this, there could be, multiple different examples that can come into play as we go forward. And then people are people, we are all humans, right? So whether we like it or not, a lot of times we don't do things just out of moral obligation or because somebody wants us to do. So we want to see that what's in it for me. So those questions are a natural change process, will automatically get answered. Of course, there are policies and all, the policing, but I think that doesn't work in my opinion.
Look, I think it finally comes down to economics, right? Do you use your spouse's or your brother's Netflix password, right? It is morally wrong, but we all do it. So the problem with villages in India is a lot more, the way it works is that a lot of your electricity bill, and the sad part is a lot of people I've met while I was selling solar is they don't know how to read their electricity bill. If you go home and see your electricity bill, there are about 8-9 things that are added. In Delhi, there are about 9, in Haryana, maybe 6 or 7. But you don't know what they are. If you understand what they are, nobody's asking you to put solar. But when the awareness happens, a lot of those are losses that the grid has to suffer because there was theft. And what happens in theft is somebody will come and say to a villager that this is a theft, I will penalize you. So what the villager does is gives him 100 rupees and that guy who actually is supposed to count for the theft walks away, right? So I think a lot of this will change as the policies are coming up. Rural electrification in India theoretically is very different from the way it is practically. Theoretically, if 10% of your village has one wire coming in, it is rurally electrified. So India has 100% rural electrification, but you just go out for, why go out? In Gurgaon we have electricity power cuts, right, where I live. So I think some of this is natural economics coming into play. And as energy costs reduce over time, or decentralized power, be it biomass or solar or battery-based systems, when this becomes cheaper and cheaper, nobody is going to, you don't cheat on your geese that's giving you the golden eggs, right? But if you have an option, you will do it. So I think my answer to support him is that some of this is natural momentum, and some of it is purely economics. And we have to solve for the economics. We don't have to solve for climate and decarbonization. We have to solve for the final mile unit economics. And if they work, nobody hurts themselves then.
Just adding a digital angle to it now, because you're on digital discussion here. See, if you have a smart meter installed, and if I'm a utility service provider, all the utilities have been investing over the last few years, and they keep investing more on providing you intelligent analysis of your power consumption patterns. Today, you don't have the option of just getting on an app and seeing that, okay, how much, if my bill is, let's say, 5,000 rupees a month, what does this 5,000 rupee means in my understandable language, which is, ये पंखे का कितना आ रहा है, ये washing machine का कितना आ रहा है, इस room से कितना आ रहा है, इस room से कितना आ रहा है. It can give you a lot of analytics, right? And then you can think beyond the, the physics and the electric terms. Beyond that, you can actually take decisions from a simple terms. अच्छा मैंने दो पंखे बंद करे, or if I change the consumption pattern in a different fashion, I will reduce 1,000 rupees, right, or 2,000 rupees. Now that is something, as a power, it comes into your hand if you have those basic, infrastructure of a smart meter. So I think a lot of these things will come into play.
That was a great question. Aren't they great? Like, they have so much knowledge. We'll take one more question, and I'll give you the mic. If you can, easier for the group to hear.
My name is Rajiv, and I'm from IBM Consulting. So I think he stole part of my question, but you mentioned about prosumers, right? So, I mean, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate because I've been through so many of these sustainability conferences now also, right? And the thing is that we're still thinking or presenting about it. I'm yet to see, rubber meets the road where things are actually happening. So, for example, the prosumer concept of CP becoming a prosumer, kind of a system, how long in the future, I mean, is it 1 year? Is it 50 years? I mean, metro was unimaginable to me when I went to college in Delhi, right? Now it's doable, and people use it like it's something which is taken for granted. So something like a prosumer, something where it actually is happening, CP shops providing electricity to people, I mean, to the grid. When is that likely to happen, and when do we become actual practitioners rather than armchair revolutionaries of sustainability?
Lovely. Nice question to bring
Yeah,
it all together.
I wish I could do some crystal ball gazing and I could give you the exact answer that when will it become a reality, but let me put it in a different perspective. Rajiv, right? Yeah. So I know the kind of talk and the thought leadership IBM used to do on consumer collaboration way back in 2010. When I was a part of a project we ran in the state of Washington in US with 100,000 households. Now at that time, in 2010, I thought this will now multiply and it will become reality. Cut to 2023 Feb, and we are still talking the same thing. So I can understand your emotions behind that, but everything has a tipping point. We spoke about climate change for last 20 years. We never took it seriously. I'm very sure that everybody in this room takes it very seriously now because it has started hitting us on our face now, right? It is not just a report. We are experiencing it in our daily lives. So everything has a tipping point, and so is in this case. The prosumer economy, coming specifically to your question, is already becoming a reality in bits and pieces. It is not just about textbook discussion anymore. Yes, the visualized image that I was trying to paint with Connaught Place as an example, multiplied by some millions of some distributed hubs, if I call it, that of course will take maybe at least 5 more years. Being very, very optimistic, but I would like to be very optimistic because every COP that will happen will raise the alarms a lot more. Every COP that will happen now onwards will push the agenda far deeper. So something that could have taken 20 years to happen earlier on will happen in 5 years. That's my personal take, but
there's a good cop, bad cop answer to this, and I'll give you both. See, finally it comes down, I mean, I've been battling for rooftop solar for every home and all of that, and some of this is not practical because of the politics. If you see how energy works or how transport works, there is a lot of top-down kind of policy and all of that. So it's not easy for visual thinking. But let me give you, so the bad cop answer is it'll take time because it has to work at B2B first, B2G, B2B, then B2C, right? But let me give you an example where it is already working on B2B, right? There's a solar eclipse in this country, and for 1 hour, all the solar plants do not produce any power. That's a big blip to the overall energy system. But we have the technology and the data, digital tools today to be able to manage that blip for an hour, which is this is the biggest risk, right? Because all of rooftop solar in Connaught Place suddenly goes for a toss if there is a little bit of a cloud cover. All of those solutions are present today, and India is very much working towards it. I think the answer comes down to the affordability. When mobile charges were very, very high, none of them had it. Now, even in rural India, people have smartphones and data is cheap. So there is a tipping point as to where battery costs will go down. Solar costs are already down, but it will be further down. Because battery costs are lower, the mobility costs will fall further. Now, if you have a power generating equipment with storage and a battery generating power, somebody like Raman is going to enter that house and say that I know exactly what to sell to this guy from a digital standpoint. So what you're not seeing today is at the consumer level, but what we are seeing maybe as industry, having spent some time in the industry, is already at a B2B level, there is movements happening. So we'll have to be maybe another 5-7 years, as he said, before we start seeing things like UPI or WhatsApp that completely revolutionize the existing system of payments and chat, SMS.
So look at the EV growth that has happened in last 12 months. If you have to buy an EV car in India 12 months before, you didn't have too many options to buy from. Tata Nexon and a few more at best, right? Today you have EV option in every segment, from starting to SUV to luxury sedans and everything, right? And the penetration is going up. So I think things like one part of that prosumer economy, which is EVs becoming a supplier to the grid also, is also to do with a basic mass being achieved in terms of enough EVs on the road and being parked, enough charging infrastructure being available, enough digital solutions being available which can work very smartly in terms of in and out from a battery, and enough participation from the consumer. So there is a lot of digital play, there is a lot of policy play, there is a lot of industry growth itself in terms of EV as an adoption. 5 years, I think I want to stick my neck to it. I believe it will happen in 5 years.
All right. So 5 years is a wager. So hopefully we'll be back in here for the, what would it be, 5 years? 23rd digital, 22nd, I'm doing my math wrong, and see whether we're all going to be, we traveled here in one of those Blue Smart cars, by the way. If you don't use Blue Smart, I think you should experience digital and sustainability coming together every day, coming to Connaught Place in one of those. Thank you to our panelists. I think this is a great start to the council conversation. It's the level of conversation we want to have, not platitudes. I really appreciate your point about talking versus doing. So I really want to thank both Raman and Shishir for contributing. And let me turn it over to our next panel, which will be on AI. And hopefully there'll be another tipping point there as well. Thank you so much.